I wanted to acknowledge all of the community that rallied to support that here at Art Centre and beyond. So as we consider all the new platforms, channels, and spaces where we find and make entertainment, broadcast films, social themed entertainment, and games, I'm often asked, like, what is the impact of technology? What is the impact of AI? And today I'd like to turn that question around and say, look at the impact of young people who are absolutely dedicated to craft and skill, and you'll see it living at the heart of every great entertainment designer. Stunning visuals, character development, animation, world making, and captivating storytellers. So today, as we celebrate very successful films and the community that make them, I also invite us to celebrate the next generation of animators, artists, filmmakers, and game designers. That's you, the students, by the way. I'd like to thank all the faculty and staff and our partners who make this possible. I know we have people from alumni and industry relations, creative careers, but most especially I want to thank Natalie Williams and Maritza Herrera. Say thank you. Who made this possible. Our associate chairs, Fernanda Olmedo, Paul Taylor, and Christophe Gomez, who lead our different tracks, that's animation, concept, and game. And most especially, I'd like to welcome Ken Bielenberg, our chair, who comes to us, many of you know as a professor, but comes to us from DreamWorks Animation and other industry creatives. So responsible for Ants, a lot of Shrek, Monsters versus Aliens, and most importantly for us, for leading our programs and being there for our students and our faculty as we create all of these new worlds that we're going to see today. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Maggie. Did you introduce yourself? Did I miss that? Oh, okay, so that's Maggie Hendry, the Dean of our division, so thank you for that. So hi, everyone. As Maggie said, I'm Ken Bielenberg, the Chair of Entertainment Design. I want to welcome everyone to ENTX 2025. This is our second ENTX. And hello to if anyone who's watching in the library, in the faculty dining room. We have overflow spaces there. And we also want to welcome our next-gen creators. We did an outreach effort to the Boys and Girls Club and a place called Home, and perhaps some others. So they are watching in the LA Times Media Center. So thank you, and thank you for being here. We welcome you. We're thrilled that all of you can join us here today. So last night, while I was, sleeping fitfully, I think I dreamt this, a question I keep getting asked, which is, what's the purpose of ENTX? And I thought, while I was dreaming or sleeping, that it's kind of in the name of our department, so entertainment design. So if we don't share the entertainment we design, there's no point. So the whole idea here is to share the amazing work that we do within the department and our students, our alumni, and faculty. So please make sure you explore, take part in game testing. We have 2 rooms of game testing. We have concept gallery in the film stage. We have animation, sort of behind the scenes making of gallery, stop motion room you can peek into. There'll be animation short screenings in this theater later this afternoon, and then the alumni panel in this theater as well, coming up later. The schedule of events is posted on each end of the entertainment design hallway. Also, a special shout out to our ChromaCorp team, who is going to be running their project that came out of the Games for Themed Entertainment class. So they won the audience award at GDC conference in San Francisco last week. So they're fresh off the success of that, and that's a major achievement. So they're competing against professional projects and some other competitor schools, but they were the ones who took home the prize. So congratulations. And also shout out to Justin and Zara, who is the faculty member who led that team. If you haven't already, pick up your ENTX program. There are some more in the lobby here. Has a couple special features. One is there's a passport page. You can walk around and look for the passport stamps to commemorate your stay here. And then there's one separate insert that if you get all your stamps, fill them out, put it in the raffle box at the end of the hall, you can enter a chance to win a signed copy of the Art of Wild Robot book that many of our panelists have signed. And that's that. There's also a puzzle listed in the program. So take a look at that. There are instructions. There's also, if you complete that, you're also entered into a contest to win a mystery prize for that one. Okay. So kicking off today, we have a special treat for you. So the Wild Robot, a discussion with the filmmakers. Following the panel, our filmmakers have been gracious to volunteer to set up at the table outside to sign programs. There's also a place for autographs in your program, or if you have the Auido book, they'll be happy to sign that. And I'll keep going. So the Wild Robot is beautiful, heartwarming, awesome, Oscar-nominated film. It swept this year's Annie Awards, which are animation's highest honor, presented annually by ASIFA Hollywood to recognize excellence in animation. So in the feature categories, it won Best Feature, Best Effects, Best Character Animation, Best Character Design, Best Direction, Best Music, Best Production Design to Ramone Zibach, Best Voice Acting, and Best Editorial. So just highly, it's probably the best, honors to get, just because that's being judged by our peers in the animation industry. So congratulations to that. So to give you a taste of Wild Robot, we're going to start with the trailer, and then I'll bring up the panelists.
Sometimes, to survive, we must become more than we were programmed to be.
Test? Okay, very good. So now I'd like to welcome the panelists. So we have Ramone Zibach, who is the production designer for the film. Jakob Jensen, the head of character animation. Heidi Gilbert, head of story. Chris Grun, who's a visual development artist on the film, and part of our first class of entertainment design graduates from Art Center, so proud alumni, and Heather Lanza, who is the co-producer.
Yeah, okay.
Cool. All right, so we will just have a casual, informal chat here for a bit, so feel free to chime in and ask your own questions if you want. And then we'll open it up for audience questions at the end. So first of all, congratulations to all of you. So I loved Wild Robot. Thank you so much for being here and participating in ENTX. And thank you, DreamWorks, for providing the trailer and the movie for the screening last night. So Ramone, let's start with you. Congrats on the Annie win for Best Production Design, much deserved. So what were your early discussions with Chris Sanders as far as the look of the film? Did he launch you off with some like high-level design ideas?
Yeah, I think, you know, Peter's book had these illustrations in it, which we loved. I loved the book. I mean, I was just fiending to work on this film, and a lot of it had to do with how visual it was and how great the story was. But when Chris started talking about what he wanted to see out of it, he wanted something almost a little more emotional, and I think we started talking about films like Bambi, which was like the pinnacle of nature, you know, animation and nature and animation, and also Miyazaki films, how beautiful the background styling is and how much those artists were capturing nature. So a lot of it was about capturing nature because we felt like that environment was a whole other character in the book. It was what was constantly against Roz, and that contrast was going to be key to how the whole thing would work. So I think those two kind of examples just led to, you know, we didn't want to copy either one of them, but we wanted that inspiration. We wanted to capture the audience the same way those films do. They make you appreciate the world you're seeing through the artist's eyes, and they kind of help define, you know, a setting and a time and a place that just transports you, and it's an artistic transportation. Yeah.
And you didn't want it to be photoreal, I assume, so there's a painterly quality.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're at the point in animation where CG, of course, can be photoreal, and there's so many live action films that take complete advantage of that and take you to worlds that are photorealistic but are amazing. And this one, it was really based in the fact that we work in animation and it has this heritage of being painted, worlds that are painted. And I came into this business as a background painter back in the day with real paint, painting backgrounds under cells, you know, and on cell layers and overlays and underlays. And so there's this heritage of in animation, and it felt like it's time that maybe the technology is there for us to actually be able to do it everywhere in the frame, because we've been, of course, you know, doing matte paintings and digimat where we could push the painterly, but it was really hard to get all the way into the foreground with that. And so I've constantly, it's been in my mind, and it, Spider-Verse kind of showed that you can really apply your style to just about everything in the frame if you want, and you just have to have a theory of how are you going to apply it. And I think with Jeff Budsberg, our VFX soup, and Baptiste Van Obstel, our head of look, the tools were actually there that we could actually say, all right, that sprig of grass is not a blade of grass, it's actually a brush stroke. Everything is based on creating new shapes and textures that look like brush strokes, and that was key to unlocking this thing. But again, it all came back to, we want it to feel painted, every inch of it. And then that led us, because we developed the world first, it led us into the characters and how, okay, what does it mean to paint fur? And that was a tall order, but I'm really happy with the result that we came to.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Since we're talking about visual development, Chris, so tell us, what were the biggest challenges for you as a biz dev artist on the film?
Well, I think for all of us was finding a style that we all agreed on and making sure we all painted the same, which is very difficult because everybody has their own hand, their own mark making. And so it took us quite a long time to find that style that we all could paint agreeably and gives us the result we wanted, right? So that was, I think, probably the biggest challenge, just stylistic, yeah.
Keeping it that loose. One of our painters, Daniel Cuckoo, was the one that was painting the loosest, and I was like, we can't do this for a whole movie.
Yeah.
But Sanders was like, well, why not? Why can't we go that far? So then I'm like, hey, Chris, let's look at this stuff and let's break it down and paint a little bit more like Daniel. And that was a challenge for everybody, but it became a style that wasn't exactly what one person was doing. It was everybody figuring out, okay, how am I going to apply this on my shot and this sequence and these elements? Because and that's how it became consistent, was through everybody. Yeah.
Cool. So Heidi, can you talk a little bit about the role of the head of story on a film, which is based on a novel of the same name by Peter Brown, who's an Art Center alumni as well. So crafting a story for an animated feature is quite an involved process. You're not just handed a script and then that's something that you produce. So were there any aspects that were particularly tricky to get right?
Yes. I guess I'll try to start with your first question about the role of head of story, because I feel like it's not many people know what it is, because I think it's a role that's unique to animation. It doesn't exist in live action. We lead the story team, and we're kind of the shepherds of the story under the director, and I like to think of the story team as like a writer's room that draws instead of types into Final Draft. And yeah, I feel like our biggest journey in story, because we started with the book, which is amazing, was adapting it for a 3-act film structure, because the story structure from the novel is very different than what can work in a film. And there were many challenges along the way. I think one of our big ones was the opening scene where she walks through the forest for the first time, and I think it's because it had so much story load to carry, because it had to serve as the Roz's character introduction. It was also serving as the forest's introduction, which, as Ramone said, we kind of thought of as another character. And to me, it was also, we had to really specify Roz's robotic programming, like what that was early on, so that when she started to exceed it, you knew that she was exceeding it. And yeah, so that scene took a long time. And it was also like, how do you get the audience to care about a character that's a robot that doesn't feel human emotions? So that was a journey for us in story.
And was that her character arc? Because she has a fantastic arc throughout the story. Was that something you found along the way, or had you planned that out in the beginning?
Her character arc? I feel like, I came on a little late to the movie. I came on after their first screening, which I think is usually late for a head of story to come on. But I feel like that it's kind of there in the book. I think it was just a matter of finessing the execution of it for a film structure. Yeah, and adding the moments where I think one of our big journeys was making sure that Roz had ownership of her journey, because early on it felt like it was very episodic. Our first screening was very similar to the book, and it felt like Roz was just going through the scenes. She'd meet an animal, the animal would teach her something, and then she would go on to the next one, and there wasn't a lot of conflict or ownership over her choices. It was like she was just doing what she was told, so it was just making changes through the conflicts in the movie and what she does to drive her arc herself, if that makes sense.
Great. So Heather, so producer's role on a film is to bring it in on time and budget, and there's a deliberate conflict that is set up between creative leadership and director and production designer and producers. So, which is there by plan. So were there aspects of Robot that were tricky to navigate?
Yes. I think the big thing for the Wild Robot, really it came down to what Ramone was saying, which was we all understood the assignment from Chris Sanders in terms of what he wanted creatively, and then Ramone and Jeff Budsberg come up with that plan in terms of what that means, and it's our responsibility then to say, okay, we see you, what does that mean from a strategy perspective? And we lay that out over the course of years. This one's got started in 2021, so you guys can do the math. And that's for lots of different reasons. We learned a lot on Puss in Boots, so there wasn't, but this film needed something different, right? In terms of what that strategy looked like, so that the guys, the creative team, felt like they had what they needed to get the beautiful images up, right? And so it's our job just to support that and make sure that everything lines in place over time. But we definitely had our learning curves over the course of the production, like any production.
Some weren't in our control.
That's right.
We had a late animation development. We couldn't get there because other films in front of us were retooling their stuff for the pipeline, and they got delayed, and then that delayed us. Yeah. And developing your characters, not only the look of them, but how they're moving affects what they look like. And there's this cycle that you want to go through that Jakob should probably talk about, but I think that that delay was something that ends up affecting every department. So Heather has to, it's because we all had actually, I think, a lot of experience that we all weathered that really well, because I think in any other situation, if I had been a lot greener or, there's a lot of factors that can go into it all kind of falling apart a bit. But for us, I felt like everybody's experience and confidence in what we were doing, whether it was ready yet or not, everybody was really clear. Like you said, we knew what the assignment was, and everybody was really together.
But and I think that's important, right? When you work in a bigger studio environment, lots of things happen that are outside of your control. So in so many ways, and you guys, I'm sure experience this when you work on your own projects, is things don't always happen when they're supposed to, but it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And I think that that's what we dealt with. And frankly, that was probably the biggest challenge, because the team did work amazing together, and we all felt very harmonized in terms of what our goals were, but there were many, many things outside of our control, to Ramone's point, on films that came before us. And as a company, that's what we do, right? We shift to make sure that those films are supported and can get out, and then it's our turn. But it does mean that it raises a lot of challenges for us in terms of, okay, now we have our crew, and so what does that look like now?
So Jakob, can you tell us about how you find characters? How what is that process in pre-production?
Well, it's a good question. How do we find the character? Well, for Ross, our main character, we were trying to figure out how do we manifest, or how does her character arc that you were talking about, how does it manifest in her motion? for example. And for a long time, we tried to develop, as we start to meet Roz, we want to convey that she's a machine, and so we were trying to figure out kind of more rigid robotic types of motion. And then with the intent of, as her arc changes and she reaches her ultimate character goal, to somewhat, that it manifests in a more organic fashion. And I think when we started our development, it was the window was much wider than we ended up with. It's now much more subtle when you compare and contrast the first shots to the last. You can sort of feel it. She becomes a real person in a way, sort of Pinocchio-like. But it's not, as we kept saying, it's sort of beep, burp, robotic. It's because we've seen that a million times, and it's like, no, let's just make her a character that we believe in, and that's that. But there is a marked change over time in the film, I would say. But subtle.
I like her naivete it's really more human, and I think that's why everybody identified with the book and with the film, because it's really like she's like, of course, a fish out of water at the beginning, but she doesn't act like a complete numbskull.
And you want to hook in the audience. You want to, you can't wait too long to identify with the main character. So she has to be a real character.
So Heather, I was just reminded, so if people were having a hard day, did you hand out stickers?
I did not. That would have been very clever.
I remember the stickers. We were handed stickers before the screening when that appeared.
Was it the first screening or the second?
It was the second.
It was the second screening. Chris.
Like, what is this?
Chris did make some stickers because he is very clever, and we did pass those out as people came into the theater.
So Ramone, during visual development, so you're talking about the experimentation that's going on and working out the painterly style. So are there avenues that you went down that didn't work out?
I think we had a certain style we were painting. So when we first start the movie, and you're really trying to sell the movie to the execs and to Universal, you do this thing where we make movie moments, and you might not have even figured out the style yet, but you've got to show something to help illustrate the film. And so not that any of them were crazy mishaps, but we did a bunch of them in styles that just didn't end up in the film, and some of them were based on Bambi, much softer. Others, I tend to revert to a very graphic look, and you can kind of see that in the later, third act and the big battle. Like I feel like graphic images really grab the audience early, so I was doing some of that. But we did, what was cool about that process was I can't remember, it was like 60 paintings, right, Chris?
Yeah, at least way more than other
like
films.
65. It started out there like, well, what if we had like 12 to 20, we can sell the film. And Chris just kept drawing other moments, so we would paint that. We'd paint that, it'd be great to have this one, it'd be great to dissolve to that. And at a certain point, we're making a mini movie, an editorial with paintings and music and shots from nature documentaries and a little bit of cinematography mixed in. So by the time it was all done, we didn't just have a pitch that we could bring the execs into and they would just look at paintings on the wall. They actually watched a short film. And it gave them everything. It gave the energy, I guess I'd say, more than anything, and the love for the subject matter that we were feeling. And yeah, some of the looser paintings were in there too, and we would point at that. But it was a great experience. Like I said, there were styles that maybe didn't end up in the final, but to me, nothing was wasted. Every moment was a way to explore that sequence, whether it was in the film or not, and really a lot of it ended up informing the final sequences.
Right. And Jakob, with the animation team, I know when I was at DreamWorks, there were different approaches as far as, just giving people sequences or shots. Did you have particular animators who were leads of particular characters?
We did, actually. 2 of them are here. Mike Amos and Drew Adams, 2 of our supervising animators. Big shout out. I think we were 6 supervisors. Drew, you didn't have a character assigned to you, but everyone else did. So because, sorry. But rather you were more doing some sequences. But for the most part, yeah, we took a more traditional, I come from 2D, and in 2D we would assign a character to a supervising animator. And we still do that to some extent, but it's, as we know, the pipeline at DreamWorks is more geared towards, feeding a sequence. So we do a bit of a hybrid of that, but, Fabio Lignini was the supervisor of Ross. Mike was the supervisor of Bright Bill, and on and on.
You did.
And I did. Well, I started developing Fink
Yeah.
early on when we were just a small group, and then eventually Dan Wagner of Kung Fu Panda fame, and he's a legend. He came on and supervised Fink as well.
Was there a particular style that Chris launched you with at the beginning? Was he looking for?
Well, that's not really, and you could even argue. We were sort of sometimes wrestling with is the style, the visual style, is it at odds with what and it wasn't really. But my pitch to Chris in the beginning was that I simply didn't really want to talk much about style in terms of animation. I just wanted, because as we sometimes say, our currency is emotion, and we want to just spend most of our energy finding the truth in every moment, and have the characters disappear into the film, and that always seemed to resonate with Chris, I felt, and I think it wasn't at odds with the style. Like, I mean, the heavy lifting stylistically was in your hands, and I think it complemented that, talking about trying to figure out very organic ways of moving these animals so that you just believe it, and so that was sort of,
You guys talked a bit about naturalistic behavior
Exactly.
versus anthropomorphic, because they needed
Yeah.
a little. Fink was really probably the extreme, right?
Fink had, at times we did develop his hands, for example, to be able to have a sort of a opposable thumb. But Chris always says, like, these characters are not animals that walk around with cell phones. And these are real animals, and so we spent most of our energy developing as many sort of little behavior cycles, and really study the specificity of each type of animal. And there were all types of, so all the different gaits had to be figured out, which is super fun and labor intensive. So.
And then you guys had a great. The biggest discussion was around Roz, because she didn't
Yeah.
have mouth. And you should probably
Mouth.
tell them a bit about your.
Well, there was a
two
mouth
big
for a moment. Like,
influences.
maybe you
Right.
can talk about that in some of the Steve's storyboards. But I mean, as an animator, I would say I always embrace limitations. It's a gift to us, and it's a little red meat to animators to delve into pantomime. So when we talked about Roz as being in the same family of Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin and French Jacques Tati, and just working with pantomime, not just because he didn't have a mouth, but just because he's the silhouette that large parts of the film doesn't really talk. I mean, she does, but so the emphasis was really on echoing those, all the rules and the art form of pantomime in Roz.
And where you had an amazing voice cast for the film with Lupita and Pedro Pascal, Kit Connor, Catherine O'Hara, and on. Were you influenced by their voice performances, or watched the videos when they were doing the recording?
You can't not be, especially Lupita. And it was so interesting to see how Lupita was wrestling with the characters as well as we were, parallel. We weren't privy to a lot of the recordings because I think they were not in LA. Some of them weren't, at least. I mean, sometimes you would come in, but am I right about that?
Yeah,
I feel like
we had recordings between London and New York.
Right, but of course Chris would chat with us about what she's finding, and we could hear it in the recording, and she was very much in the same way, trying to find the humanity in her, and starting out as we were, in a far more robotic way, and it didn't resonate. So it took a while, but it was interesting to see the sort of convergence of ideas.
Right, and I'm sure you've all prepared and been asked what your favorite sequence is, so I'm not going to ask that.
Very good.
So what was your maybe not least favorite sequence, but the sequence that was like, sequence 500.
I know what Heidi's is. Can I guess?
Can you guess mine? Heather?
I can guess all of theirs.
Let's try. I mean, I know you know mine, but
Heidi?
mine was the one I talked about. We called it Sequence 250, which was our problem child, which was one of the first scenes in the movie, but it was one of the last ones to get out of story because we just wrestled with it so much. Yeah.
Anyone else?
I love that sequence just because painting a robot in nature was just like this amazing combination. Like we could just do that all day long. But I guess I could hate on it just because it took a while. It took forever for us to get it, and it felt like, man, it's done already in our minds as far as what it's going to look like. But really getting it out of story and into production was a big one. So that was just tough. Yeah, just delayed.
I love that we talk about the sequence so much because it's good for everyone to understand. It's a sequence that from a producer standpoint, on a strategy standpoint, it's a crowd sequence. It has a ton of characters. And so Jeff Herman, who is the producer of the film, we would oftentimes talk after a meeting, an editorial or something. He'd be like, Heather, we're going to feed that soon. And Heidi would be right behind him in my office, like 5 minutes. We are definitely not turning that over.
I feel like that was every meeting with you. It was like, we're not ready.
Every single one, and that's okay, right? And that's what I want to stress is that, so often we do have to have those conversations where we're preparing with the art department and the animators. This sequence is on the rise. It is being turned over, but from a story perspective, if it's not ready, we have to be able to shift very, very quickly. But that sequence we thought would be number. What?
Are you talking about the truce, or am I thinking?
No, the forest.
Still talking about 250. I have not.
Oh, there's a list, I'm sure. but the forest was definitely the one that we thought would be fed into production within the first 5, I think, and it was the last.
I think it was because another thing we struggled with was the amount of dialogue to put in that scene, because in early screenings we had it just silent and just leaned into the wonder and beauty of Roz discovering the forest, and it was really compelling, but it wasn't setting up her character the way we needed it to for the rest of the film.
To me, I was going to say the most challenging. I don't hate it. I love it, but it was like a sequence that we also had to wait. Yeah, it's the lodge when we get into the truce and everyone is there in the lodge with every character possibly in there, and so for good reason it had to wait until all the characters were rigged and figured out. And so I think the benefit of all the development we had done even in pre-production with those characters that were ready, and then subsequently into the rest of the film, we kept making cycles, keeping that sequence in mind, even though we hadn't quite seen the final story version of it. Like these things will need to happen. So rather than making sort of random animation tests, let's find behavior that hopefully could lend itself to being plugged into that. So we partnered also with our crowds team, who took a lot of that burden as well, because it was a lot. Like in some shots, hundreds of characters. Yeah.
So switching to career questions. So we have a lot of students and young folks who are interested in animation and getting into production. So Heather, for a producer, so we do have students who are gravitating towards production management. I saw Wen here somewhere. So what is your advice for someone who wants to go that route?
Laura, take your time to learn every single thing you can. There is no rush. Animation, I think every film I've ever worked on, I learned something new. And that's really important. You don't necessarily have to work in every single department, but it is so important to learn everything you can and just be a sponge, especially those first couple of years as you're working. And then just know that, as you're learning individuals and the people, because you understand the process and the workflows, that the people always come first, and I think anybody in production knows that, is that our teams come before anything else, because these movies are the marathon of filmmaking, and they take a long, long time, and so I would just say, just get to know not just process and workflow and departments, but also the individuals in every single space, because they're all very different, and we manage for them before anything else.
So for Chris and Ramone, a lot of students, talk about wanting to do visual development, and it's a little bit of a loose term depending on what studio you're at. So, how would you define, the role of a biz dev artist?
Like modern, like we're doing everything, right? We're doing as much software, we're painting as much in multiple styles. I think just do your research and know, like, if you're looking to get a job at a particular studio, understand what that studio wants from you, right? Like you're studying what the studio produces, so you can then make that art yourself. Right? So it's a little bit of everything. There's no one job. Whatever that studio needs. Yeah.
I think we look at books and we see what people are doing and what they're using, and even all the way to modeling and in which ways we see people, being plugged into the system, but we also love seeing what their passion is. What's different that this person is doing, because I don't need somebody to fit in perfectly. I need somebody to bring something along with them. So I think that's important for people to, you want your portfolio to stand out in your way, and I think that's great. The other great thing about now, which didn't happen when I was in school, was you actually have a lot of access, you have a lot of information, you actually can really see and hear a lot of what the job means. So I think you guys have a clearer idea of what it takes. We see great books, all the time. Sometimes you just wish you had enough spots. But I think just be passionate about what turns you on about this. I for me, in every aspect of animation, that's what I always want to see. I want to make sure somebody's in animation because they love it, not just because it kind of fit or whatever. You need passion to be able to stick with a project for 3 years, and I think that's important to see that in work and see that the person understands what they're kind of getting into,
Well, and Heidi, we do have students who are interested in story and storyboarding. So in our concept program, in the animation program, and illustration program. So there's students who are pursuing that. So what's your advice for someone who wants to go into story?
That's a good question. I feel like it's very different whether you want to do storyboarding in TV animation or live action filmmaking or feature animation. They're very different jobs. I would say if you're wanting to get into feature animation, then study story, because you're going to be a part of that writing and story process, maybe more so than you would be if you're in TV, which is more the script is God and you just start visualizing it. That's not what the job is in feature. But I feel like the crossover is you have to learn staging and composition and storytelling drawings. I grew up wanting to be a hand-drawn animator like Jakob. And so I studied animation, and in hand-drawn animation, it's very much about how do you tell the story with one pose. And I feel like the more you can learn about all aspects of animation, the more it will help your storyboards, because it's visual storytelling. And I feel like my boards tend to gravitate towards acting because of that animation background, but that doesn't mean that you have to be that. I feel like there's every type of story artist. Some people are good at comedy, some people are good at action, some people have really cinematic boards, and others are more like comic books or just gag drawings, and so I feel like I would figure out what speaks to you and what you gravitate towards, and really push that as find your strength and lean into it. Don't feel like you have to be a jack of everything.
And Jakob, so we do have students who are pursuing 2D animation as well as 3D, so all the animation students learn both. So that's your background as well. Do you have advice for them as they're pursuing?
Sort of conflicted about what to say about it, because I've been sort of wrestling with that for my career, the importance of understanding your fundamentals and understanding, how absorbing everything from those around you that you admire, and figuring out when you watch any bit of animation that you like, why you like it, figuring out which specific artist is the person that resonates with you, and find out who they are. If you're lucky enough to work with them, great, and then absorb what you can from them. And I did, and took me a long time, however, to find my own voice, which is sort of echoes of what we're talking about in the film, and finding our style. There's nothing more important than figuring out what your voice is, because no one can emulate that except you, and there's nothing more important to me, at least. So that doesn't mean that you don't have, you inject your entire formative years with the DNA of others. That doesn't mean that you're mimicking others, at least once you've formed your own version of yourself. Does that make sense? I mean, I think, so yes, you have to absorb, you have to understand your stuff. You have to understand motion and action analysis and design. Even if it's even if it's 3D, you have to understand design and what constitutes a good pose. And you have to understand emotion. You have to understand performance. Whether it's 2D or 3D, that doesn't matter. But as quickly as you can, I would say, try to figure out what your own voice is. Because people will react to that. I mean, when we look at people's work coming in and portfolios, we don't really look at portfolios in that sense, but we see reels coming in. Of course, now just in 3D, right? So, but it's important to see that there's a spark. There's something very unique about this person, and it's a little bit more difficult in 3D, I find, to find what's unique about a person's take on animation. In 2D, you have that added layer of the voices in what you do with a pencil. So I'm not really answering the question, but it's, you can tell I'm wrestling with it, but it's an important bit of wrestling.
Yeah. Well, why don't we open up for questions? I think there was going to be a mic on the side. Oh, okay. I guess, Heather can do that. So, if you want to make your way over to the mic. Okay.
You need to hold your. Go for it.
Finally hard to get that thing on. Awesome.
Okay, go for it.
Hi, my name is Irene Zhang, and I just had a question quickly about talent acquisition and how you curate these teams. For specifically the Wild Robot, how do you guys create this team that it is now? What were you looking in specific portfolios? More biz dev stuff I'm curious about. What in a biz dev portfolio did you think, oh, this person is gonna fit our team, the Wild Robot?
You want to start with the art department, maybe? Yeah? Are you asking about the art department in particular, or?
Yes.
Yeah, for visual development.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, being in a big studio, part of it's who's available. A lot of the people that I worked with, Chris included, are people that I'd worked with before, so a lot of times it was well, I know what this person can do. Daniel Cuckoo had worked on Puss in Boots, and he works remote, and I had seen his stuff, and I was like, this guy's great. Other people like Chris Brock, who's also an alumni, are just people that we painted together on projects for years. And so as far as visual development on the kind of location side, it really just came out of being lucky enough to have people that were available that were gonna fit this film and had painted in different styles. So for me, early on, it's important to feel that people are flexible and can try different things. And then as far as designers, Richie Ceciliak, I always wanted him to art direct with me, and he's just an incredible designer. So he was designing, and Chris Grun was designing also. And those people just kind of fit in. What's great about Chris is he also has a lot of CG experience coming from Digimat. So there's things like that people don't usually think about, but having a lot of tools in your arsenal helps, because maybe you're going to actually help the rest of the department. And Chris did a lot of that, like getting assets for stuff for people to paint over from other departments. That's huge, and we do that really early if we can. And then character design, we had 3 character designers, and I always loved Nico Marley, so he was available. We had Borja Montoro working remotely, and he was kind of meant to take Nico's designs and kind of find the more animatable version of that character and maybe inject a little more naturalism, because Chris Sanders thought we needed that. And then we had Genevieve, sorry. And Chris Sanders brought her in, and she was somebody that he had worked with, and she came in and just went nuts on every character, and it was great because we ended up with a range of style across our characters because of her.
Thank you so much for the answer. My last question was related to that. So do you usually just go out of your way and like find people from the pool of people that you know to join in on these productions, or are there like a separate team of talent, like acquisition people? Yes, like recruiting team that like send you a couple portfolios and you choose from that?
Yeah. We have recruiting department, and they're constantly looking at books.
Yeah, they don't stop looking.
Right.
We do have to keep a fresh talent pool, and it's a revolving door, right? People come and they go, and some people stay long time, and some people enjoy going studio to studio. So they don't stop working, but and depending on where the pool is. Sorry.
Yeah. Depending on where the pool of talent is, when we're staffing a movie, Ramone will always build his team with the people available that he's worked with, but it doesn't mean that we don't need something special or unique that we will go look for.
We've had people actually, again, it's a big studio, and TV went through some there was a bunch of series maybe that didn't get renewed, and there were artists there that to me it was almost like coming straight from the outside, because I didn't really know these people. Like, we work very independent of each other, and Wayne Say is like one of our best painters, and we got him from TV. So to me, that's all. We definitely are always looking outside, and then we're looking at the availability within.
Okay, thank you so much.
Hello. Hi, my name is London. I'm graduating with a focus on visual development this term. I have 2 questions. First one is like, in terms of the visual development portfolio, you mentioned that there's like some portfolios with like a something that stands out and kind of different. Personally, out of the many portfolio that you've seen, especially from like student portfolio, what are some pieces that stood out to you, and what do you think that made it stood out?
I like seeing when there's a project with a lot more work, and that's new, because like when I was submitting my book way back, I had a Lamborghini in the desert, I had just the most random artwork, that you could think of, and now you guys curate your own kind of development of projects. I love seeing that. So depending on the style, and then a lot of times I'm seeing a lot of great plein air painting mixed in with that too. So you really get a feeling of how people are interpreting the natural world into a style, and then seeing the kind of projects that they gravitate towards.
Like a thoroughness of thought as well. Yeah. Like, we really want to see something that's like a complete idea, or like how you've explored, how you got there. Of course, the ideation, the travel that you took. Because if you're just showing finished pieces, it's almost not enough now. Because in VizDev,
we're designing from scratch, right? We might get a really loose storyboard and then try to build that out of nothing and kind of give it back. And so, yeah, I think that's that. Can you complete your thoughts in, from beginning to end and in color, and then how do you treat that color? Because a lot of what art department does is color keys. That's, like half the movie is probably designing the color, so that's super important.
Thank you. And the second question is about how you mentioned about emotion, and this movie was filled with emotion when you're starting the visual development too. I think I cried 5 times in these 5 separate moments. And in the visual development pieces and paintings, how do you push the emotion, and in terms of colors and character moves and poses beyond what's conventional, I guess.
The artists just bring that. But I don't grab photos off the internet and go, this would be great. A lot of times I want somebody to take their pass, and then there'll be we do paint overs, or we work with the artist and we try things because you see where it's going, or you want to push that statement further. It is a conversation that gets you there, but there's other times when it's just the person did their first pass. You're like, let's just do that, because that's awesome, and that happens too. So it's a bit of a mixed bag of how, at least the way I work, but I always want to see what the artist is bringing first.
Yeah, there's the color script as well, right, where you design the overall feeling and the moods as you transition, and that usually comes a little later, but yeah.
I tend to not. There's a lot of people that try to map out a whole film, and I've done that before. I've assigned color, like Kung Fu Panda had colors assigned to all kinds of properties of that film. And this one, I think because it was so emotional, it was nice to see, all right, now that we really know the sequence, let's see what it brings. So it was always hard for me to try to preempt that with ideas, but there were, like I said earlier, when we did that very early pass at all those story moments, there were color ideas that stuck from there. Like Long Neck on the Beach with Roz was a painting in that reel, like same tone. The fact that it would all go gray when Roz is sitting on the edge of the cliff after Bright Billy, there were ideas that were there early, but I never sat there and said, well, how's that going to work against 5 sequences later in a color script? I think we just had all these great pieces. But a lot of times people will do rough color for every sequence and map it out that way.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Eli Jarvis, and I still have 1 year left to go at Art Center, but I've still a lot to learn. But I wanted to ask specifically kind of a question more geared towards AI. I know you probably are sick of hearing that, but I do think it's important. So you guys obviously did a really beautiful job on the film, but I'm sure the question of would it be cheaper to produce something like this with an AI is definitely something that came up. So what artistic direction do you guys think you took that differentiated the project from AI in maybe a stylistic way, or colors, or any thoughts on that?
I think Daniel Kaku, the painter, is actually faster than AI. So he could do complete paintings, 20 versions. Yeah, he was amazing. So there are people that are faster. There's that.
And doesn't it harken back to that whole conversation about finding your own voice? I mean, what can AI do? It can only emulate what's been done. Which is why I urge everyone to find their own voice. Because the only thing you can't fail at is being yourself. I know it sounds hokey, but it's the truth. So there.
and like Jakob's getting at, those frames didn't exist before, So I'm pretty proud of that. I think, there's a lot of conversation around just how it can, I use content aware fill, all right, when I'm messing around, and that's as far as I'll go. But there's a lot of development happening around, basically supercharging an artist, and I'm curious where that's going. You would end up staying within a style that you start, but AI would help you do a lot more. In theory, that sounds great, but as long as there's an artist leading the thing. I've just seen a lot of soulless attempts in AI so far. And I've been in this industry a long time, and animation has been like a school for me that I've learned from people constantly, from people next to me and around me, and it's a constant growing process. I just don't know if you can emulate that. We'll see. I imagine that people will try, but thank God there's a big legal thing around it for now.
I feel like this movie, the way it exists and also the way it was made, was so emotional for all of us. Like, we all talk about it like it's the film of a lifetime for us, and I feel like you couldn't make this movie with AI. Like, it's so human, and it's so, everyone brought their soul to it that I don't know. I don't think there's anything about this that could be done with AI.
No, I agree. I mean, technology is always going to evolve, right? It's our job in the animation industry to evolve with technology. But to their point, filmmaking is collaborative. And I think anybody who was making movies during COVID felt that first feeling of like, oh my God, where are my people in the room that I can talk to and feel and get inspired by when we work next to each other? That's a unique feeling that you're not going to get, and it's projected on the screen, right? You see it in every painting that the team did on the film.
Just because I'm super passionate about this. There's something lost in this conversation to me when I follow, and I try not to because it makes me angry. But no one has talked about, like, we do this because of the process. This is why we do this. If anyone wants to rob me of that, what's the point? I mean, but we do it because of that, you know. And I love what Miyazaki said about it, and it resonates with me that it's what did he say? It's an insult to life itself. Like, yep. I mean, maybe there's great things that we could use it for as a tool, sure. But right now, for me, it's the process. I'm a very process-oriented person. I think we all are.
Thank you. I really appreciate your answer to that. It's always great to hear reassurance.
So we have 10 more minutes.
Hi, my name is Kat Lapp. Thank you all for being here today. I really appreciate it. With the rise of stylistic animation, we see it doing really well in the box office as well as winning many awards. Are you finding that studios are now kind of leaning more towards stylistic animation and going that further step? And how is that process for you guys? Is it fun? Is it hard? Is it a little bit of both?
I don't know. Like, when we pitched this, like, I think we're very lucky that we had Chris Sanders at the helm. Like, having that kind of, having the studio have confidence in a filmmaker to go, all right, we're going to take this chance with you. I think it's still a big risk, because if studios look around, a lot of times they tend to look at what has been successful, so you're kind of a little bit chained to the history. But there's no denying that films that look different make more. I say it all the time, and that whether Wild Robot broke a bunch of box office or not, the people will be there to see the sequel of that film because they loved it in every way, and because it was different, and because it kind of stood out. So I think that, I can't totally speak for the studios, but it's always a job to convince them of something new.
I was going to say, I think each film, we went from Bad Guys to Puss in Boots, and having worked on Puss in Boots, it was still a big mountain to climb to get this one to a place where the studio felt comfortable for many reasons, but each one had unique risks, right? It is a risk, and it's not a risk that they don't want to take, but it's something that we have to manage to make sure that they feel confident to keep it moving forward, right? And it's not necessarily because it's stylized. There's lots of different elements to why a studio is risk averse for reasons when they see these films.
I mean, technology plays a part of that
It's
too,
a huge
right?
part.
Like, how much can you develop your look before you go into production?
That's right.
and like then you just kind of stop developing and you just have to make it, and everybody, if you're working with different studios on making one film, all the studios have to match your style. So that's really hard to make are you sharing technology? Right?
Yeah, and we do a lot of tests leading up to that, right? And not only, I would say you do all these tests before you do what we call scale, right? Where you staff your movie and you've got 300 people working on top of each other. But you have to, there's a lot of things that have to be put in place before that. And so as long as you're proving those things, right? We always talk about the creative, but there is that technology roadmap, if you will, that we have to put together to prove out our ability to work efficiently when you do have a crew of 50 lighters that are trying to render the frames.
Thank you so much.
I was gonna ask how exactly you're able to lock down the story in the beginning. I was talking yesterday with Paul, and he said that one of the first screenings, a lot of things were already like locked into place before they really started developing a lot of the things. So I was just curious on, whether it was a lot of improvisation and changes from the adaptation, or if there were a lot of just decisions right at the beginning where like no compromises were going to be made, and that's what it was going to be.
I don't think, I feel like nothing was locked in the beginning, and I feel like maybe the one thing you could say that was maybe locked was the migration scene, which Chris Sanders boarded himself, and we all loved, and it was one of the best parts of the movie. But everything else shifted, and I feel like that's always, I look at the purpose of the story team is to kind of, we make the movie before we make the movie, right? Like we make the movie when it's cheap and they just have to pay for us doing these crappy drawings in Photoshop. And then when we feel good about what we've done, then it's like, okay, now we can give it to Heather and she can send it down the rest of the production pipeline where they spend the real money and bring on these huge crews to make it. But I feel like it's a case-by-case basis how ready the scenes are. Like, I think the migration scene was one of the ones that stayed pretty consistent from the beginning, and the scene where Roz gets attacked by the bear and finds the egg was also one that was locked in pretty early, because we knew that was going to happen regardless of what, like, that was a storytelling pillar, right? Like, we knew she had to discover the egg, we knew he was going to fly away, like, and everything else, it shifts based on earning those moments, and but it's an ever-changing process, and we make the movie like how many times? Like 7 times before.
No, we do, and I think that's really important, is that you can always have, we always start out with great scripts. I've read 3 great scripts this week, but we schedule in our strategy 5 to 6 screenings so that we provide ourselves, and each one of those screenings is anywhere from 16 to 20 weeks apart. We do that so that we learn something. We can make sure that we're all tracking along and everything feels the way it should feel from a story perspective. And that should not be scary, right? When we're working on these films, we put everything down in a plan so that we have those 5 screenings. We understand what needs to be done over the course of those 5 screenings. And at the end result is what you get, right? So it's supposed to change. It's supposed to evolve so that you get something really beautiful in the end.
Thank you so much.
Hi. First of all, thank you so much for being here. I had a question also in the story vein. You mentioned earlier that the story team guides the story under the director. I was wondering if you could go a bit more into that process. Like, do you get a script and you decide to change certain things, or you guys just go crazy with it?
That's funny. I feel like we start with a script that was written by Chris, in this case, who is also a story artist. Like, he came up being a story artist and turned writer. But I feel like I like to describe it in parallel to live action, because I think what happens in live action is they write the script and then they rewrite the script and they rewrite the script and they rewrite the script 100 times, and then they're ready to shoot the script. And in animation, we get a script, but it's probably been written like 3 times. So that iteration process happens through the story team and the storyboarding process in animation. So it's very fluid. We're not, and it depends on the director and the writer and how collaborative they are and how much they want the story team involved. If they're very rigid, which Chris was not, then maybe they would be more like, nope, we just want you to stick to the script. But a lot of times, I think Chris understands the power of that story process and what can come out of it. And so, we will start with the script, and then if there's things that we feel like aren't working in the script, then we'll say that to the story artist. I remember one of the scenes that I think that played a big role in was where they build the lodge for the first time. When that scene was first being created, it was a mix of all these other scenes that got cut. Like we had Bright Bill needed to be named, and then we had Roz naming Bright Bill and kind of Bright Bill naming Roz. But I knew the needs of the story was, at that point in the movie, we need to really care about that relationship between Roz and Bright Bill, and that was missing in the script. So we needed scenes to see them bonding and growing closer so that we started caring about that relationship. And all we had was like, we need him to build a lodge and we need him to be named. And we threw that to one of our story artists, Taylor Meacham, who he's also the one that boarded the panic attack in Puss in Boots. But I had worked with him on Puss in Boots, so I knew he had that skill, because you have to cast to the story artist's skills, and I knew he had the skill of like filmmaking and making these story choices, and he knocked it out of the park. Like it came together, and that I think that's just a small, piece of a huge puzzle, but that's usually what it looks like, is like, oh, we watched the screening and some things are working and some things aren't, and we know we really want to feel this moment and we're not feeling it yet. What do we have to do here to feel that here? Like that kind of problem solving happens, and sometimes it happens from the director with the vision, and sometimes it happens from the story team pitching an idea or a solution, and it's just a very collaborative process. But I think challenging the story always makes it better.
Thank you so much.
Hello. Do I have time for 2 questions or just one? Well, there's just one. Okay. I'll just whittle it down to one. So, it's kind of you may have like a shorter answer for it, but I really like robots. I really like androids, and this movie came out like a perfect time for me because I've been really into androids, and I love stories of like androids that kind of learn to grow past their programming. So this movie was perfect for me. I really enjoyed it. My question is, I know you guys, you wrote her character, didn't necessarily like design her visually, but what's your advice on designing and writing an engaging android character? And what about her do you think works so well? Roz, I mean.
Yeah, Chris Sanders put together we had this sheet, I should have actually put that up, but it's all the android/robot characters of film kind of history, and we looked at them all, for what's appealing about them, and we did a lot of experimentation in the design early on, because we didn't want to just be relegated to one thing, but we did end up coming back to Peter's design of a very humanoid robot, and there was a simplicity to what he was doing. And Chris always wanted a connection with her eyes. He didn't want a mouth. And so those things became rules that we were following in the design. And he had a very clear, at least, idea of her limitations. Like Jakob was saying, those were going to be interesting, how she was going to problem solve with some of those limitations. And then I didn't realize just how much we were going to be able to use the connection with her just through her eyes, and how much animation controls were in her eyes, and I thought that really worked out well. So no, we went through a lot of experimentation. For us, those were the things I think ended up standing out and being important about her. Jakob, you might have some other...
I'm just thinking, is this on? Like, when in doubt, keep it simple, right? I mean, when you're talking about androids and anything about robots, guess what? It's not really about robots, right? It's about humans.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. 'Cause
So
yeah.
the simpler you keep it and the more human-like, I think it's probably the trick.
Yeah.
Thank you.